Hi everybody, this is Father Warner D'Souza, and I want to thank you for joining me once again as we study the Gospel of Matthew. And today I want to look at chapter 22 verses 34 to 40. On Wednesday, we were in chapter 20 of our lectionary. On Friday, we find ourselves in chapter 22. In this period, Jesus has foretold his death for the third time, healed two blind men, entered Jerusalem, which would be Palm Sunday, cleansed the temple, and headed to Bethany. On the way back, he curses a fig tree and then gets into an argument with the chief priests and the elders, to whom he addresses three parables of judgment. Wow! It seems like the gentle flowing brook turned into a gushing river, all with the turn of one page. This brings us to chapter 22, where the temple becomes an intellectual background between Jesus and various religious groups. Jesus finds himself engaged by the religious establishment in a political, theological, and spiritual debate, all with the hope that he would make one error and so give cause to be arrested. The opening attack comes from the Pharisees, whose queries were asked with the sole intention to trap him. We read this in chapter 22, verse 15. They begin with a political question: should one pay taxes or not? Jesus' answer leaves them amazed, compelling them to leave him. Save face or simply go away. However, they were followed by the Sadducees. We read this in verse 23, who fundamentally rejected the resurrection or the belief in angels. Yet they pose a bizarre and most hypothetical theological question on the resurrection. When they too are left silenced in verse 34, the Pharisees return, now having licked their wounds. They enter the ring. Round 2 has begun. But this time, however, the attack formation is abandoned in favor of what must have seemed as a most subtle single combat. Their spokesperson was a lawyer. The date chosen was the Tuesday in Holy Week. His question and Jesus' answer forms the heart of today's gospel. We must be careful not to understand the lawyer as we understand a modern day legal eagle of our justice system. The lawyer mentioned in the gospel was a scribe who was learned in the Torah. The question he poses encapsulates the Pharisaic obsession to grasp in a nutshell the summary of the law of Israel, or an elucidation of its core. For the Pharisees and the scribes, the minute and scrupulous practices of the law had become far more important than its very intention. The law was merely a body, now with no soul. In citing a double commandment, Jesus puts the heart back into the law. Loving God was beyond a doubt the most important aspect, but it did not make sense if it was not accompanied by the law of love for God's people. The love of God is not some mushy emotional feeling, but implies covenantal fidelity. Our love for God is a covenant and not a contract. This implies that our love must go beyond the demands of contractual agreements, for it demands a love with all one's heart, all one's mind, and all one's soul. The covenantal love of God is not some you scratch my back and I will scratch yours. Covenantal love demands more, even when not asked or mandated. The command to love God permeated the consciousness of every Jew, for it was imprinted in the Torah. We see this in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, and in their hearts. However, what also formed an essential commandment of the law, but perhaps a less central text in Jewish liturgy, was the love for one's neighbor in the same manner as one loved himself. This law of Leviticus chapter 19 verse 18 is not merely written as a curb on some narcissistic love, but an encouragement of love that finds balance by loving others in the same measure. In pronouncing the importance of these two commandments on which hangs all the law and the prophets, Jesus contradicted the rabbinical view of the law. For the rabbis, the world hung on the Torah till it resembled a strand of hair that held the weight of a mountain. More law, less love. In bringing the vertical and the horizontal dimension of love together, Jesus enunciates a holistic spirituality. The covenantal relationship with God is also a call to a covenantal relationship with one another. Those who believe that salvation is merely a practice of the vertical dimension of God and self end up looking like poles facing heavenwards, directionless and meaningless. But to this vertical pole, if a horizontal dimension of love for one another is added, then there appears the symbol of the cross. I want to thank you with all my heart for being part of these reflections. Many of you follow these every day. But this word of Jesus needs to be shared with your friends. I'm sure many of you are doing that, but if you haven't, then don't be shy. Don't hold back. Simply send this to all your friends. And for those who are watching for the first time, if you haven't subscribed and really love what we do, then do subscribe to this channel. Thank you.